Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of My Marvel Legends, where I show you my action figures collection. And as I had promised last week, that I would be showing you today something which is pretty much connected with our favorite team of mutant superheroes. And yes, you're right, I'm talking about the X-Men. So what is the most important bit when it comes to superheroes are the supervillains. And a story cannot be complete, and the same thing is that when we are collecting action figures, you cannot have your collection completed if you don't have the necessary supervillains that form an important part of a storyline. And because of that, I have been able to collect some action figures over the years. A lot of them are still in my bucket list, but a good number of them I'll be showing them to you just now. So I deliberately did not place any action figure right in front of me because I wanted to give you a very good surprise, because there's a lot that's gonna really amaze you. So first up is the action figure of one of the most notorious X-Men villains, Mr. Sinister. This guy who likes to play with the genes of mutants, and he is pretty much notorious when it comes to developing clones and so forth. He has been quite close with Apocalypse. He has been pretty much involved with Strife as well. So Mr. Sinister is one of my favorite villains, and I'm glad that I have his action figure. So next up is I don't know if should we be now this character is not a supervillain anymore, but back in the day he was one of X-Men's most deadliest of foes. You guessed it right, the Juggernaut. So I'll show it to you, give you a bit of a closer look. Kane Marco, Professor Xavier's step brother, and I have his action figure as well. Then an adversary of Wolverine, who made his first appearance in Iron Fist comics. One of my favorite villains when it comes to Wolverine, but he has been a thorn in the way of X-Men as well. His name is Sabertooth. This is the first appearance Sabertooth, the one we saw in Iron Fist comics back in the late 70s. So as you can see, this is Victor Creed. Till now, whatever I'm showing you is Toy Biz. Now, of course, this is the first appearance Sabertooth. But what about the modern version? Especially the one that was designed by Jim Lee back in the 90s. There you have it. The new costume of Sabertooth, or the modern costume. I won't call it new because it's been quite a long time since we saw this in comic books. I just have this, I don't know, if I come across a comic book or a story that has Wolverine and Sabertooth, I know for a fact that I need to have this comic book, this graphic novel. I just love their animosity. It has been illustrated beautifully, it has been written about it wonderfully. Okay, so now one of the classic villains that led to the creation of Cable. Any ideas? The Apocalypse. Apocalypse and his four horsemen made their debut in 1980's X Factor comics. and he had basically infected baby Nathan Christopher Summers, son of Scott Summers Cyclops, and Madeline Pryor, who was the clone of Jean Grey. And that infant had to be transported to the future so that a cure could be developed and he would be cured for life. Later on, he would come back into the present as Cable, older than his father, and he also happens to be one of my favorite X-Men characters. And like I said, he was part of the New Mutants. He was the leader of X-Force. We saw him in Deadpool movie, and I believe there are a lot of good stories that need to be told about Cable. Age of Apocalypse movie was a disaster. Age of Apocalypse comic books were some of the best ones that were ever produced. I highly recommend that you read, because it is one of those comics that really makes you understand what kind of a being Apocalypse is, what kind of a mutant Apocalypse is. So, okay, then we have another one of Wolverine's adversary. His tentacles are somewhere in the box. The Russian Weapon X project, Omega Red. Omega Red made his first appearance in the 90s during the time when Chris Claremont and Jim Lee were working on the first few issues of X-Men 1991. Omega Red, from the first get-go, became one of the most favorite villains, but for me, second only to Sabertooth when it comes to Wolverine's arch nemesis. So this is Omega Red. I'll place him alongside Sabertooth because both of them share a common enemy. But now, the X-Men are hunted by these artificial intelligence beings, and they take no prisoners. One of the best ever villains produced, and I'm lucky to have these giant Sentinels, which I'm not placing them on the table right now because I need to show you guys their look and feel. How many do I have? Well, I've got two. These are almost 19 inches tall. These are huge, and pretty much you can recreate a scenario where Wolverine is going up against these villains, these robots, and Wolverine can hang suspended in the air. Of course, they are not as detailed as articulated. They are articulated, but not as articulated as the recent Sentinel action figure, which is like 38 inches tall, which is huge. And it also has electronic features. It comes with replaceable heads. It also comes with 3 other 6-inch action figures of Bastion and people from Operation Zero Tolerance, which is another X-Men crossover, very important X-Men crossover that was produced back in the 90s. So I'll just put Apocalypse here so that there's room for another one of Sentinels. So now you guys can't see me. This is pretty much crowded. Now, I did not show Magneto because Magneto is more of an anti-hero. And it's not the first time that he became an anti-hero. In the recent runs of X-Men comic books, he was a good guy back in the 80s, Chris Claremont, John Byrne era, when he became the headmaster of Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters when Professor Xavier had disappeared into space. So, but one very important villain from the late 90s X-Men, one of the most groundbreaking crossovers that involved the Avengers and the Fantastic Four. I might as well now put this guy down. It's this guy, Onslaught. The dark personification of Professor Xavier's thoughts. I would call him the dark side of Professor Xavier, who would unleash a lot of damage and would get so many characters involved within the saga. As I said, it would be Avengers, it would be the Fantastic Four, and his particular interest was in Franklin Richards because of his superpower abilities. And of course, Professor Xavier was one of them. Jean Grey was also one of the threats that he was quite concerned about. But this remains one of my favorite villains because I read the entire Onslaught saga, and to me it was one of the best ones ever. Of course, there are a lot of people who would disagree with me, but this villain remains my favorite. So these are all the X-Men villains that I have. Minus Magneto, because I showed you guys Magneto in my earlier episodes of My Marvel Legends alongside Wolverine, and as I've said, Magneto is not the correct definition of a supervillain in this day and age because of his past behavior. And but these individuals that we are seeing right in front of us, these characters that we see right in front of us, are known for all the bad things that have happened in X-Men's history. Some of them have been responsible for deaths for many other characters. It's hard to name, but as like for example, when we come across Sabertooth, he had fatally wounded Psylocke at one point in time. His fight with Wolverine before the Age of Apocalypse remains one of my favorite fights. Sentinels were also involved in the Onslaught saga, but overall, if you look at read the stories of the Sentinels from the 80s and even the 70s, when Neil Adams was also working on X-Men comic books as an artist, one of the best villains a person can ever come across, and especially their role in Days of the Future Past. I can go on and on for each and every one that I have shown you. So I hope you guys like this. Please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, like my Facebook page, follow me on Instagram, follow me on TikTok, and if you are into superhero gaming, please make sure to follow me on Twitch. Thank you once again, and I'll see you next week with another set of action figures.